Chapter 95, Animal Inside. After the silence hung for a while, Anthony finally spoke up. If I have to tell this part, it's going to be pretty short. Spike and Samus both managed to chuckle at that. Alright, Samus stated finally. Well, as we were about to enter the geothermal plant. As Samus and Spike approached the entrance to the plant, both paused. Above the door, the shape of the creature they'd been pursuing could be seen, split open and discarded like the shape of the little birdie had been. Both steeled themselves at the sight. They were about to face an unknown threat, and they had to be extra careful when they did. A few chambers beyond, and they found themselves in the plant itself, dark from everything being turned off. The pair made their way carefully onto the central platform, glancing around to see any threat that might be there. As they walked, Spike froze. "Mom!" he whispered, his eyes tracking from her boot up her body. Glancing down, Samus saw the red light of the laser sight tracking up her body. Spinning, she saw a figure in Federation trooper armor with a heavy plasma cannon aimed towards her. On the assumption it was a deleter android, she prepped her arm cannon. "Samus!" Anthony shouted out. "Get out of the way!" Reacting instantly, Samus dove to the side. A figure behind Samus leapt into the air, the sound of leathery wings echoing in the chamber as Samus and Spike raced to back up Anthony. "Damn!" Anthony swore as he tried to track the creature. "I can't see a thing in here! We gotta clear out!" The exits over there Spike began, only to witness a blast of flame destroy the bridge between platform and exit. "No!" he whispered. It was familiar, too familiar. "Not again!" "Spike!" What Samus began. "Samus!" Adam interrupted. "None of you can fight in the dark like that! Use your super missiles to blast open the eruption port to get the magma flowing for the power plant." Nodding, Samus isolated the eruption port and unleashed a super missile. The port exploded, magma pouring in and illuminating the entire chamber. As she spun to track the target, Ridley erupted from beneath the flowing magma, his glowing eyes locked on her with baleful rage. Samus staggered back. She'd fought Ridley several times, but each time, he had been different. Whether amplified by cybernetics or phase-in, or simply the ravages of time, he was a distinctly different figure in each confrontation. But here before her, in sight, sound, and even smell, was the very same visage she had seen when her parents died on K2 liters when he ravaged her Chozo home on Zebes. He was once more the face of her nightmares. Samus struggled against the fear and rage that raced through her being, doing her best to maintain the mental control the Chozo had taught her, but her concentration slipped as the nightmares returned. She saw her father exploded right in front of her eyes to protect her from Ridley. She saw the scorched ruin of her world. She smelled the charred flesh that had spattered her in her dark hiding spot. She heard Ridley all but gloating over how he'd eaten her mother to sustain himself after her father's suicidal tactic had only damaged him. The death screams of those who counted on her, whom she failed, echoed in her ears. Unable to completely fight off the nightmare images, to completely separate reality from nightmare, her power suit began to fail as her focus wavered. "Samus! Do you copy?" Adam yelled in her ear, but she barely heard him. "Samus! Use your plasma beam!" Her suit registered the command and reactivated the functionality, but Samus continued to fall back. "What's your status? Samus, do you read me?" But his words were swallowed by the nightmare. Spike and Anthony lunged forward to try and get between Samus and Ridley, trying to draw his attention. As soon as they were in sight, Ridley let out an enraged shriek and lunged for Spike, his lashing tail smashing Anthony's plasma cannon and knocking him aside almost contemptuously. Spike struggled to match Ridley in battle, but it was much like his first fight with the dragon. Except this time, Ridley was a young and strong dragon in the full power of first flight. Spike was the one having to marshal his power to keep from breaking the world around him. Ridley had no such compunctions. Before Spike knew what had happened, Ridley had hurled him into the wall of the chamber before leaping forward, slamming both hind talons into his gut. Spike struggled to break free, but Ridley moved too fast. Catching hold of Spike's skull, he brought it down in both claws to slam his knee into Spike's jaw, dazing him. Ridley then hurled him to the platform below and dove in, digging claws into his foe's back and driving his barbed tail through his right wing. Spike screamed in agony. Something inside Samus snapped. Spike's scream of pain cut through the storm in her mind. "Get away from my son!" she roared out as her suit responded. Samus paused in her tale. I don't actually remember what happened next," she admitted. "All I know is what my suit logged at the time of what settings I altered somehow, and the damage it did to the suit in the process. Something about putting it into overdrive, risking permanent damage to the suit, and interlinking upgrades to unlock new systems, something about an electromorph." She shook her head. "Probably not what you want to hear." "Heck no, that's not enough for this part," Rainbow Dash complained. "Anthony, you describe the battle." "No can do," Anthony admitted. "When I got hit by Ridley's tail, I fell into the magma below. Missed the whole fight." Twilight gasped in shock. "How did you survive?" Anthony smirked, a wicked twinkle in his eye. "How do you know I did?" he teased. "Yeah, I already did that bit with Spike during the ether section," Pinky pointed out. "Not gonna do it twice." Pouting, Anthony lowered his head. "Froze a magma monster with my freeze rounds," he grumbled. "Spike, at least tell us you saw the whole thing," Scootaloo pleaded. Spike grinned widely, his eyes somewhat starry. "I certainly did. Get away from my son." Spike glanced up as he heard that roar, as did Ridley. A blaze of light that Spike recognized as Samus and Shine Spark slammed into Ridley, driving him back and slamming him against the far wall. As dazed as Spike was, all he could manage to think was, where did Mom get room and time to trigger Speed Booster? With Ridley pinned against the wall, Samus Speed Booster jets and Space Jump Boots triggered, keeping her hovering in the air in front of Ridley as she proceeded to wail on him with punches, kicks, headbutts, and charged plasma blasts that diffused through his whole body. Even as she unleashed an unbelievable wave of punishment, her power suit fluctuated, rippling with the colors of every suit configuration ever stored as data in its systems. Ridley attempted to swipe at her to push her away, only to receive 3 super missiles energized with a plasma beam in quick succession to his shoulder, elbow, and wrist joint, atomizing his right foreleg. Screaming in agony, Ridley finally managed to kick Samus away before turning to try and run, bombarding a firewall with his weapons to open a hole. Samus landed heavily on the platform as her suit shifted, briefly taking on the yellow of the standard power suit and then the black of the Phazon suit. "Get over here!" she roared at him, hurling a grapple beam that was a lot thicker than normal. It latched onto Ridley's tail and dragged him back to the platform. As Ridley thrashed in desperation, Samus grabbed his left wing with her free hand and ripped it from the joint as easily as if she were pulling a roast chicken apart. Screaming, Ridley spun to try and attack, only for Samus to slam a power bomb into his crotch, the explosion somehow tightly focused so it only blasted forward to obliterate his lower body. At this point, Samus' arm cannon shut down, no longer able to handle the strain it was undergoing after focusing the blast of a power bomb. Undeterred, Samus leapt onto Ridley's torso and delivered punch after punch to what was left of the dragon. In desperation, Ridley tried to lunge in for a bite, and Samus' arm plunged straight down the dragon's throat. When it jerked back out, it held a lump of flesh that pulsed and wept blood. She crushed it in her hand. As Ridley fell backwards, Samus stalked forward and brought her foot down on his skull, crushing it beneath her. As she caught her breath and turned towards Spike, the young dragon slunk up to his mother, finding himself purring as he nuzzled her hand, soliciting affection. Relaxing, Samus stroked Spike's head. Then she glanced around. What happened here?" she marveled. "Just to check, Discord dropped a pin." The sound of its fall, let alone its landing, was plainly audible throughout the entire castle. Chapter 96, Mother and Child. Eventually, Rainbow Dash was the first to speak up. "That was awesome!" she squealed out, breaking the stunned silence. "I had no idea you could fight like that." "Neither did I," Samus murmured, completely stunned. Did I really do all that, Spike?" "You did," Spike confirmed. "It was amazing. Though, I don't really understand my reaction. I mean, you've fought to protect me plenty of times before." "I do," Fluttershy replied quietly. As all eyes turned to her, she ducked her head behind her mane. "Well, I think I do anyway." "Go on," Adam encouraged. "Well, not many reptile species keep their young in the nest after they hatch," she explained softly. "And those that do, the female won't re-enter her mating cycle as long as she's tending her young, no matter how long that is. So, some males, well..." Her voice trailed off. "We'll kill the infants to make the mother re-enter her mating cycle," Adam offered. "Though that's more a trait I'm familiar with in wild mammals, especially big cats." Fluttershy nodded. "Well, the reason I bring up reptiles is that, when it happens with them and the mother reptile catches the male at it, well, she becomes especially vicious. With the big cats, driving the male off is enough. With reptiles, though, the mother won't let the attacking male escape. She'll drag him straight back to the nest and tear him apart, limb from limb, if they have limbs, right in front of the nestlings. In Equestria, this most commonly happens with cockatrices, as a rival male trying to kill the young is the only threat that a female cockatrice won't use her petrification gaze on, and the first thing she'll do is rip the male's eyes out and feed them to her young, before continuing to rip the offending male apart." She relaxed as she continued her lecture on the violent and terrifying behavior of the land's wild animals. This generally results in an even stronger bond between mother and nestlings. Isn't nature fascinating? "So, you're suggesting that might be part of instinctive dragon behavior?" Anthony asked. And Spike's instinct saw Ridley as the enemy male trying to... "Let's not finish that sentence so that I never have those mental images, thank you very much," Samus interrupted quickly. "I'll admit to being open-minded when it comes to interspecies relationships, Spike, Gandrea, Rarity, and whoever else springs to mind, but leave Ridley out of that equation, especially when it comes to me." Discord burst into raucous laughter. "Oh, if you only could see the things that I see," he teased, rolling his eyes briefly into the 34th etheric dimension. "I'm pretty sure we're all glad for the sake of our sanity that we can't," Cadence offered dryly. "Now where's the fun in being sane?" Discord teased. "We get more story, for one thing," Pinky suggested. As several gathered chuckled, Discord conjured more popcorn for everyone as all eyes turned back to Samus and Spike. Nodding, Samus continued. Samus carefully read the readouts of her suit until everything came up condition green. The only things of concern were the gravity suit, space jump, and screw attack functionalities, which were currently undergoing internal repairs due to the overload. Once her arm cannon gave her the all clear, she rematerialized it. "Alright, let's go," she ordered Spike. But what about Uncle Tony?" he asked worriedly. Samus winced. She'd been so caught up in the moment, she'd forgotten Anthony had been there. "Did you see where he went?" she asked. No," Spike offered sadly. I saw him get hit by Ridley's tail, but then I lost track of him." Samus frowned under her faceplate. "Then he either landed in the lava below, in which case we've already done the only thing we could for him by killing Ridley, or he didn't, in which case he's fine somewhere." She put her hand to her helmet for her communicator. "Adam, do you have a readout on Anthony's bio scans?" When there was no response, she tweaked her systems to boost the signal. "Adam? Are you there?" Spike swallowed nervously. "So, no sign of Anthony, and no sign of Adam?" "The deleter might have gone after Adam once it realized he was coordinating us," Samus postulated. "Or, it might have gone after Adam because it already got everyone else." Spike swallowed. Then whether Anthony or Adam are alive or not, our priority has to be to track down and neutralize the deleter android," Samus stated firmly. "How's your wing?" "Already healed," Spike replied, flexing his wing. "I ate the one you tore off Ridley." Samus hesitated. "I'm not sure how to feel about that. It's not like we're even the same species of dragon," Spike countered petulantly. "And if it isn't cannibalism, meat is meat." Samus thought about that for a time. "Want the rest of him?" she offered, turning towards the body, only to see how much damage she'd actually done. Never mind, I guess there isn't that much there. Wow, she thought silently to herself. I really lost it there, didn't I? She shivered, afraid of what this showed she was truly capable of when she stopped holding anything back. Did you have to crush the skull? Spike whined. The brain's one of the tastiest parts. Rolling her eyes, Samus playfully smacked the back of Spike's head with her armored hand before latching onto a grapple point to swing through the hole Ridley had blasted in the wall. Without Adam's guidance, we had to plot our own course beyond that point, Samus continued. So we fell back on our old skills, exploring any new area we could access with the abilities I had at my disposal. Super missiles allowed us to access quite a bit right at first, but we quickly decided to leave Sector 3. When we got out of the elevator, however, we spotted someone in Federation trooper armor taking the elevator to Sector 1. Since we couldn't identify them, we went after them, on the assumption it was the deleter. Chapter 97, Broken Child. So how did things go in Sector 1? Celestia asked curiously. Spike and Samus exchanged glances. Complicated, Spike admitted. Though I'm not sure if it was more or less so because of Spike's sense of smell, Samus added. How do you mean? Luna inquired. We'll get there, Samus replied. The trip through Sector 1 was somewhat difficult to manage as more dangerous creatures began attacking, although Spike was able to handle the escalation relatively easily. We also managed to spot the figure resembling a trooper a few times in our pursuit. At one point, a bridge we needed to cross shut itself down right ahead of us, the control device on the near side damaged. At that point, my suit alerted me that my space jump and screw attack functions were fully repaired, and I made the decision to activate them, since I was unable to contact Adam, and there was every possibility we were the only remaining operatives on the mission. The path led to a new elevator, Spike continued. Which is when we encountered Melissa again, and finally got her name. Even if she lied about it at first, Samus countered. Reasonably so, Spike insisted, as they began speaking of that part of the tale. As Samus and Spike entered a large new chamber, they saw the only feature of interest being an inactive computer system. As they approached, however, it turned itself on. Samus quickly went to examine it in an attempt to access some files, but Spike hung back. He felt something when the computer turned itself on, and he wanted to be sure it wasn't what he thought before approaching. A nearby door opened, and the blonde woman they'd helped earlier stepped out. She started to back through the door when she saw Samus, but paused when she saw Spike, shaking. It's me, Spike offered softly. You don't need to be afraid. We're here to protect you. He stepped forward, shrinking himself down to human size and shifting to a bipedal physical configuration. I'm Spike. This is my mom, Samus. What's your name? The woman stepped forward nervously. I'm Madeline Bergman, she offered. The one mentioned in the computer files? Samus asked incisively. Then you know the purpose of this station? Madeline nodded. I do, let me show you. She took a seat at the computer accessing files as she made her way through security protocols. Behind closed doors, the Galactic Federation was trying to create a special forces unit composed of bioweapons. In order to make it happen, they were attempting to create an organization modeled after the space pirates, with the Zebzians at the center. As we deduced, Samus muttered. I've heard of if you can't beat them, join them, but to recreate your worst enemies as a weapon? Spike grumbled, shaking his head. What were they thinking? Yes, Madeline replied. Things went according to plan, but a certain presence caused the life forms to become ferocious. We were no longer able to control them. She paused, as though trying to formulate her next words carefully. Spike leaned down. Where did they get Ridley's cells to clone him? He asked firmly, causing Samus' eyes to widen. Madeline frowned. Scrapings from Samus' suit upon your return from Zebes, she admitted finally. So now you're going to tell us about where the Metroids are being bred, what insane idea the military had for making them into weapons, and what security is in place, Spike continued. Madeline lowered her head to the console, calling up the files on the Metroid militarization program. Samus stared, stunned as she took in the details, realizing how she had unwittingly been used by the Federation to create this. But, to control Metroids, they would need Mother Brain's telepathy. Did you clone that as well from my suit? No, Madeline corrected. We developed an AI program to generate Mother Brain's thought processes, including the telepathy that controlled the Metroids. We called it, MB. And then Madeline gave you her name, Spike spoke up, catching both women off guard, awakening your heart, and once you had emotions, the Federation couldn't control you. So they ordered you terminated, and you fought back. Madeline stared at him, her expression stricken. What? I'm part Metroid, Spike replied. Not much, but some. Enough, at any rate, to feel Mother Brain's telepathy, but not be controlled by it. So I felt it when you remotely activated this terminal. At first, I thought you might just have telepathic abilities, so I got close enough to scent your mechanical components, identifying you as an android. He smiled softly, reassuringly. So, what name did Madeline give you, Miss Bergman? The android looked away. My name is Melissa, she admitted softly, sadly. What are you going to do with me? What do you mean? Samus asked, confused. I'm Mother Brain, Melissa explained. The last vestige of the space pirates you hate so much, and the key to the military's ability to control this program. Logic dictates that you eliminate me to achieve your long-term objectives. Is that why you ran away? Samus asked softly. When Melissa nodded, Samus shrugged. Well, there's another logic. The Chozo created Mother Brain, with built-in limiters designed to prevent her from going rogue, until she became filled with so much rage at being enslaved that she circumvented them. You, however, are a new entity with her capabilities. To me, that says you are a newborn Chozo, or at least as Chozo as Spike or I are. So answer me one question honestly. Have you, or any creature under your direct control, killed anyone since you were born? Melissa closed her eyes, then shook her head. No, she replied. I agitated the creatures, but they were not under my control. They never were. I didn't mean for things to go so bad, but I hadn't realized how agitated they had become from Ridley's presence. You only acted to defend yourself, Samus stated firmly. We will protect you. And if we can find Madeline still alive, and she can forgive you for what happened, and you are for not being able to save you before, then we'll find a place in the universe where you can live peacefully and unafraid. I think I might even have one ready, she added silently, remembering the problems on Ether. Staring up at Samus in disbelief, Melissa closed her eyes, wiping away tears before throwing her arms around the hunter, clinging to her like a lifeline. There's one more thing, Spike added, looking at the files. We'll need to eliminate any and all Metroids on this station. What? Samus demanded, stunned. But they've been modified to remove their vulnerability to cold, Spike explained, indicating the file in question. Whether or not they were successful, if any of them remain, Melissa will always be hounded by those who seek to use her to control them. No faction can have that at their disposal. Melissa nodded slowly as she released Samus. Though unpleasant, your logic is undeniable. Sighing sadly, Samus nodded. She didn't like the idea of once again exterminating Metroids, but there really seemed to be no other choice. The Metroids are in Sector 0, Melissa explained, calling up the map of the station, isolating the unmapped area. It resembles Torian on Zebes, and can be accessed via Sector 2. How can we destroy the whole sector? Spike asked. It has a built-in self-destruct protocol, Melissa explained. If enough damage is inflicted to the sector, it will disengage from the station and explode. Then that's my job, Spike declared. Mom, you should stay here and protect Melissa. I'll take care of Sector 0. Are you sure you can? Melissa asked worriedly. Samus chuckled. Just going to disengage your limiters and blast around? She asked. That's the plan, Spike confirmed, turning to leave. He then smirked over his shoulder as he shifted to all fours. Any objections, lady? Rolling her eyes, Samus shot him a thumbs down. "Good luck, and stay safe." "Will do," Spike promised, turning to head back to Sector 2. Chapter 98, Split Path, Spike. Was splitting up really such a good choice? Rainbow asked worriedly. I mean, creepy space base straight out of a horror movie. With Melissa now emitting soothing telepathic waves to calm the creatures down so they wouldn't attack me, except for the larger ones that were already on a rampage? Spike clarified. And no more Ridley to counteract those waves? Rainbow paused, one hoof raised as though to make a counterpoint, then settled down. Okay, I guess that makes sense. As several members of the audience chuckled, Shining Armor spoke up. So anything in particular you had to deal with in the way of hazards or enemies? He asked curiously. Well, on my way out I encountered the biomech creature we dealt with several times before, Spike began. But it wasn't that much of a challenge for me, mostly because of where it attacked me. Why would that affect anything? Twilight asked curiously. Was there some aspect of the terrain that gave you an advantage? No, it was a completely circular room, Spike corrected. He then grinned wickedly. One which I knew was nowhere near any vital systems or the outside of the station. Twilight tilted her head in confusion at first, but quickly reached the same conclusion that Rainbow vocalized. Turned your limiters off? Rainbow asked wickedly. Spike grinned. Yup. Tore the bugger apart. His grin faded. Of course, that's when I found that not a single part of it was edible. His grin quickly returned as everyone laughed. It wasn't a complete loss, though. It seemed I was on the right track, that the Seeker missiles would have given me a missile system. Lifting his right arm, the gauntlet around his claw shifted, revealing a missile launcher. Sweet! Scootaloo squealed, rushing up to examine it up close. Of course, generating the missiles drains energy from me, since I don't have anywhere to store them, Spike explained as he let Scootaloo, then Rainbow, then Luna and Twilight examine it. Still, useful in any number of situations. Don't have the super missile option, but I can fire up to 5 missiles at a time with independent lock-ons. Any problems in Sector 2? Nightlight asked curiously. From the sound of what we've heard, I get the feeling you didn't encounter anything serious. Well, when I reached the path to Sector 0 from Sector 2, I encountered an area where security caused gravity to go screwy, Spike explained. Reverse gravity proved more problematic than enhanced gravity, since my armor automatically adjusted how much of my strength it was limiting to account for the gravity change, so I always felt like I was in normal gravity. Suddenly flipping from ceiling to floor was more disorienting. And then there was the enemy I encountered just before Sector 0. As Spike entered the tall, circular chamber, he looked at his map. Alright, the entrance to Sector 0 is right up there, I just need to get up there. Spreading his wings, he leapt into the air, flapping his way towards the top of the room. As he made it to the 3rd level, he paused. Something about the shape in the center of the roof was concerning. Why are all those cables leading into that thing? He muttered. Deciding not to think about it, he approached the door. Just before he reached it, energy flowed down the cables into the nearby construct, which turned out to be another biomech. This one had a fully armored blocky central body, 2 armored wings to either side that flex like arms, and a hanging tail with a strange glowing device at the end. When the device flared to life, gravity increased dramatically. Damn, Spike snapped, letting his armor readjust as he clung to the platform, only for gravity to shift again. Okay, that settles it. They were designing things here to kill me, too. That's what this is. His eyes narrowed to slits. Well then, let's give this nightmare a field test. He raced around the platform, tracking the creature as it fired balls of energy from its wings at him. He rolled to the side to evade each blast, tracking the beast's movements. He quickly saw that the source of the gravity manipulation was the device at the end of the tail, and that the beast moved to keep him away from it. Huh, is that so? He growled deep in his throat. Well, can't plan a launch in changing gravity, time to take a different risk. Shuchokra. His armor disengaged, he dealt with the changing gravity as it happened, racing around to get a good angle on the gravity device. As soon as he had a good shot, he unleashed his ice breath to try and freeze the device. It seemed to be working, but the creature reacted quickly, spinning to intercept the blast with its wings. Frustrated, Spike continued to race around until he could get a good angle. Eventually, the device became completely frozen, and the changing gravity ended. As soon as it did, he lunged forward, grabbing hold of the creature and clawing at its armor. Eventually, he managed to pry the faceplate off, revealing a grotesque green facade that seemed to be on the verge of melting. Ick! Spike gagged. Well, I have to do this anyway. Pulling one arm back, he plunged his claws into the gooey face, feeling bone crumble as he punched through full force. Twisting his hand and gripping, he ripped back out, riding the now dead creature as it crashed to the floor before exploding. Spike turned to the hand he plunged in, gagging at the stench. He quickly unleashed his fire breath to cleanse it. He then made his way to Sector 0. Sector 0 itself, Spike concluded. Well, I don't really want to talk about that. It wasn't pleasant. He turned away, saying nothing. Twilight quickly came up to his side. Spike! She offered consolingly. Much to her surprise, Spike shrank down until he was the same size as he'd been when he'd gone missing. Just hold me? He pleaded. Nodding, Twilight pulled Spike into her arms, cuddling him and nuzzling his head. Chapter 99, Split Path, Samus. As Spike curled up in Twilight's embrace, Samus decided to try and move past it by continuing the tale. While Spike made his way to Sector 0, I got ready to escort Melissa. Unfortunately, we were almost immediately confronted by the Deleter, trying to finish its mission of destroying all survivors. A hunter-killer android, Gore mused curiously. Obviously an achievement at the time, but I came across no such project anywhere in the Federation data banks at a later date, which indicates that it did not function at the desired level. How did you handle it? Samus shrugged. It was, both easier and far harder than I thought it would be. Once Spike was on his way, Samus nodded to Melissa. Alright, let's go. Turning, she moved to lead the way out, only to pause as the door opened, a familiar figure entering, helmet removed. Adam? She gasped out, both in surprise and relief. You're alright. When I didn't hear from you after the Ridley fight. Get down, Melissa shouted out, lunging forward and pushing her to the floor, just before Adam's rifle would have sent a round through Samus' faceplate. Samus spun, confused as she leveled her weapon. What? She demanded angrily. Adam, what are you? There's no psychic impression. Melissa interrupted her. That's not Commander Malkovich. It's the Deleter. The Deleter turned, still wearing Adam's face, its weapon shifting as its cover was blown. That same disapproving gaze Samus knew so well was turned her way as it opened fire with a plasma beam. She quickly grabbed Melissa and rolled to the side, out of firing range. Get to cover! Samus ordered her. Nodding, Melissa hid behind the nearest command console, using her telepathy to activate all those around to distract the Deleter even as Samus moved to confront it. She quickly saw that the Deleter android was nearly as mobile as her, but not quite as well armed. However, it was nearly as durable as the biomech she faced before, able to both take and give a great deal of damage. Not only that, the design of its circuitry caused an error in her suit's lock-on systems, meaning she had to use manual targeting for all of her weapons. On top of that, even the plasma beam didn't do much damage, even diffused and fully charged. All it did was slow it down momentarily, and it was still fast enough to dodge missiles. As she fought, however, Samus found some old anger building up inside her. She knew that this wasn't Adam before her, but somehow in her mind's eye, she found herself thinking of every moment in the past Adam had pushed her, and the unresolved anger that had been buried each time. As she faced down the android, she remembered that her anger had apparently done something to her suit's capabilities before, and decided to try and make use of it. Disabling her beam cannon, she charged in, closing the distance to melee range. I was never good enough for you! She snarled out, delivering a solid right cross to the android's disguised face. As it staggered back, she spun and kicked it in the knee, and she heard the crunch of metal as the join broke from the impact. It wasn't enough that I could do everything you threw my way, you'd never treat me like one of the guys. It tried to swing up another weapon, but she grabbed hold of the elbow joint, forcing the arm around so it shot itself. Even when I was in the Federation I was an outsider. Lunging forward, she slammed bodily against the deleter, slamming her helmet against Adam's face. And always that same look whenever I was around your baby brother, she snapped, hurling the android to the ground. I didn't even see him that way. He was just my first friend my own age. Her arm cannon reactivated, super missile slotted in for rapid fire. And you wouldn't let me save him. She fired super missile after super missile into the thing's body until she ran out of ammo, an android to destroy. As she stared at the wreckage before her, a familiar voice spoke behind her. He knew you could be just as reckless as he could be, Adam said softly. Before that mission, he made me promise, if I had to choose between letting him go or letting you risk yourself to save him. She turned, seeing Adam not quite meeting her gaze. We were in agreement. There was a great deal of potential in you, more than you could ever achieve in the Federation. The only way you could become the hero the galaxy needed, was if I pushed you away. Samus slowly stood up, taking in Adam's words. They had the ring of truth. She let them sink into her mind, and accepted their meaning. She nodded silently in understanding. Divisions of the Federation military are on their way, Adam stated, once more looking Samus right in the eye. In all likelihood, it's the group that built this battleship, and will want to silence any survivors. I found signs of one in room MW, toward the rear of the Bioweapons Research Center. I assume Spike is dealing with the Metroids in Sector 0? When Samus nodded again, Adam continued. Then we need to get Melissa and the other survivor off the station before the military gets here. Losing the deleter's signal likely accelerated their timetable. Reaching into the wreckage of the android, Adam withdrew its central processing unit. They won't want anyone seeing what's on here. He turned back to Samus. Any objections, lady? Managing to smirk under her mask, Samus gave her traditional thumbs down. Celestia smiled warmly as she heard this part of the tale come to an end. So you two were able to work through the last bit of what stood between you? She asked softly. Thanks to violently beating him to a pulp in effigy? Luna teased. Perhaps I should try that? She glanced sideon at Celestia, who responded with a blown raspberry, much to Rarity's astonishment. It was the beginning of reconciliation, Adam admitted. We still had a long way to go. Thankfully, there was ample opportunity later. The rest of the present mission didn't go as smoothly as we could have hoped, Samus explained. Then again, that was to be expected. Chapter 100, Split Path, Melissa. Room MW wasn't actually all that far from where we were, Adam began, taking his part in telling the tale as heads turned towards him. However, once we got there, things were a different story. Melissa tried to calm the creatures down that attacked us, but something else was influencing them, something Melissa was unfamiliar with. Because of that, Adam and I spent most of our efforts on protecting her, Samus explained. During that time, I also talked things over with Melissa. She had some anger towards Madeline, since her perception of past events had led her to the conclusion that Dr. Bergman had handed her over to the Federation for destruction, especially since she felt Madeline's fear in their last meeting. In our talk, she reanalyzed events, and came to the conclusion that perhaps Madeline had been afraid for Melissa, rather than of, much as I was afraid for Spike at the time, even with the report that Sector 0 had disengaged with the station and had likely self-destructed by then. Since Spike hadn't returned to the station. Her voice trailed off. You were afraid he hadn't made it out alive, Celestia suggested softly. Yeah, Samus agreed. And there was also Anthony. We hadn't heard from him, so we had no idea if he was alive or dead. Sorry to worry you like that, Princess, Anthony apologized. Admittedly, by then I had figured out why our communications weren't working. See, our comms were designed to relay through our ship. After my fall, I made my way back there to resupply, only to find all its systems smashed. The deleter, Rainbow concluded. Adam and Anthony nodded in response. By the time we made it to room MW, Samus began. As the trio reached room MW, they heard a loud scream. Melissa's head immediately shot up. "Mother!" she called out, fear audible in her voice. She ran ahead into the room, Samus and Adam close on her heels. What all three saw stopped them cold. The room was large and square, with various control pillars scattered about, and large extra thick security doors would have another chamber sealed off normally. However, the doors had been forced open, and a Metroid Queen had forced its way out, and had ripped the door out of its slot to get at the red-haired woman inside. The woman had features similar to Melissa's, though it was hard to tell as she scampered away from the Queen's searching claw. "Leave her alone!" Melissa screamed out, racing forward with her arms stretched forward, her teeth clenched. The Metroid Queen and the few Metroids it had released hesitated, moving back from the door. However, as Melissa positioned herself between the door and the Metroids, the Queen clenched its jaw and moved its head forward. Melissa staggered back, then held firm, even as blood started to leak from her nose. "What's going on?" Adam demanded in confusion. Mother Brain's telepathy is based in how a Metroid Queen controls its offspring, Samus snapped out. But Mother Brain had a much larger cerebral capacity, and could generate enough telepathic power to control a queen and hundreds of Metroids. But Melissa doesn't have that much brain power to call on. She's not strong enough to overrule the will of a hungry queen. Even as Samus spoke, Melissa was forced back a step, then two. Blood started to leak out from under her right eye. "Mom," she stammered out, sparing a glance towards the woman in the small room. Run!" She winced and sank to one knee as the Queen took advantage of the momentary distraction to press forward. The Queen's jaws opened wide to crush the interloper. A super missile to the side of the Queen's head rocked it back and broke its concentration. The other Metroids flew back from Melissa's last surge of energy just before she collapsed to the floor. "Adam, Madeline!" Samus barked out. "Get her into one of these rooms! I'll handle the Queen!" Rounding on the massive creature as it reeled from the impact, Samus took advantage of Melissa's last energy surge to freeze the floating Metroids, destroying them with super missiles. In a rage, the Queen rounded on her, pursuing her into the larger chamber it had come from. As she stepped into the darkness, Samus quickly accessed her suit functions, restoring one of her old visors. Given Metroid vulnerability to cold, she reactivated her thermal visor. Spinning, she flipped out of the way as more Metroids lunged for her, spawned from the Queen's back to hunt her down. Leveling her arm cannon, she unleashed a charged blast, freezing the group. Seeing just how fast she would need to work, she went into her arm cannon systems, switching functions so she would automatically fire super missiles. The risk of damage to her systems was worth it to keep Adam and the others alive. Once two more batches of Metroids were destroyed, the Queen roared in rage, crystal formations erupting from around its head and neck before it unleashed a blast of fire at Samus, which she barely dodged by backflipping over it, grateful that her Varia suit kept her from being burned by it, even if she did have to switch to X-ray visor because the flames blinded her thermal visor. Once again accessing her missile functions, she switched from super missiles to seekers, locking onto the crystals. Racing around the chamber, she managed to leap onto the Queen's back, unleashing her missiles at the crystals, shattering them. Even as they broke, however, the Queen only got back up. "Samus!" Adam called through the comms. "From your own records, a Metroid Queen can only be damaged from the inside, and only one weapon in your arsenal can do enough damage to counteract it feeding on you once you're there." Samus nodded. "Understood, Adam," she replied coldly, activating the functionality even as she leapt forward, going into Morph Ball as the Queen roared, rolling straight down the beast's throat. Outside the chamber, Adam ducked for cover behind everything he was able to put into place between himself and the chamber Samus was fighting in, even going so far as to shield Madeline and Melissa with his own body. "Power bombs authorized!" he called out. "Do it, Samus!" As he spoke, the explosion went off, tearing through the chamber and searing straight through everything around it, coming close enough that Adam could feel the wave of heat against his back. He knew if he'd been even a few centimeters closer to the epicenter, it would have seared right through his armor, cooking him alive. Much closer than that, and he'd have been incinerated. Once he was certain Madeline and Melissa were safe, he stepped into the main chamber. The walls that had been meant to keep the Metroid Queen locked up were fused together. If Samus was in one piece beyond them, she wouldn't be able to get back through. "Samus, do you copy?" Adam called out worriedly. "I read you, Adam," Samus replied. "There was a path out of here, but it's broken." "Samus!" "One moment, Adam," Samus interrupted. As Adam waited, he heard the sounds of Samus' footfalls, followed by her banging against the wall every so often. When she heard a sound she liked, she paused. A red spot began to glow on the wall, followed by a highly focused plasma torch beam punching through. This continued in a small circle. Once it was complete, Samus pushed out the circle, exactly the size of her morph ball. Through the hole, Adam could see her smirking at her arm cannon. "Thank you, Gore," she murmured softly, before shifting to morph ball and getting through the hole. "You are quite welcome," Gore offered with a warm smile. "I am glad to see that function continue to be of assistance." Chapter 101, Aftermath. As everyone around marveled at the intensity of the tale, Samus continued, filling in the last few details. "Adam actually had to carry Melissa all the way out, she was in such a bad state," she explained. "Thankfully, with the Metroid Queen and Ridley dead, there was nothing agitating any of the creatures, so we didn't encounter anything hostile on the way back to the ships. Of course, that's when we learned that Adam's ship had been sabotaged." Adam stared at the wrecked ship he had coming on, the vast majority of its systems torn out and tossed towards the open docking bay doors to float out into space. "That's problematic," he grumbled. "Not really," Samus replied. "My ship's big enough inside for everyone as long as Spike shrinks down. Strapping him will be a problem, but as long as we don't accelerate too suddenly." "You've got room?" Anthony called out, stepping out of the wrecked ship. "Boy, is that a relief, Princess! Thought we'd be stuck here." "Anthony," Samus gasped out in relief. "You're alive! And kicking?" Anthony responded, grinning widely. "But where's the ankle biter?" Samus' words were cut off as a rift in space opened above her ship. Spike flew out, landing roughly atop the broken Federation ship. He slowly lifted himself up, looking haggard and worn, a 1,000-yard stare dominating his eyes. "We need to leave quickly," he managed to say, his voice sounding detached. "A Federation military vessel is nearly here, and it locked weapons on me after I identified myself." "Everyone onto my ship, now!" Samus barked out. Once everyone was on board, she strapped herself into the pilot's seat. "Spike, brace everyone!" Once everyone was braced as best they could, Samus gunned the engine, shooting out of the battleship docking bay. Almost immediately, her sensors showed that she was being locked onto with weapons and tractor beams. She cursed under her breath. Even with the ship's cloaking tech, it was only a matter of time before a lock-on was made, and they were either taken into custody or destroyed. As she sent her ship into a twisting course, trying to evade, she saw another wormhole open, this one large enough for the ship to dive through. Glancing back, she saw Spike's eyes glowing. Realizing he'd opened it for them, she sent the ship straight in, hoping Spike knew where he was sending them. "They tried to destroy you?" Cadence gasped out, stunned. "They were desperate," Adam explained. "When we took the CPU from the deleter, they received a signal, so they knew that we had the proof not only of what the battleship was about, but that they tried to kill everyone involved to keep the secret in the Metroids. That would be enough information to completely destroy their careers, or even send them to jail for life, if not the death penalty for treason. Their entire modus operandi had been based in keeping the operation secret," Gore explained. "If the secret got out..." He let the sentence peter out as he shrugged. "So where did Spike take you?" Apple Bloom asked curiously. "Did he find someone who could help?" "He took us straight to Admiral Dane," Samus explained. "A good choice. Not only did we know him personally, he had always been firm in his stance against bioweapons, even more so than Adam. If there was anyone high enough in the military hierarchy to handle the situation who we knew would be on our side, it would be him." She paused, glancing away. "Not that it went how we wanted it to." Admiral Dane frowned across his desk at the group gathered there. I'm afraid things aren't as simple as you'd all like them to be, he admitted finally, having heard the entire story from all involved and read through all data they provided. While I can take action, there's really only two possible courses to take, and I doubt any of you will find either palatable. What do you mean? Samus asked, frowning. The first option is the full inquiry, Dane explained. Drag all of this to light, show the entire Federation what was being done on the battleship, and how far they were going to keep it secret. Full inquests and court-martials for those at the highest, and everyone involved facing the harshest penalties that can be levied. I like the sound of that, Spike growled, the sound rumbling along the full length of his throat. You won't like the sound of the next part, Dane continued. MB will also have to be brought to light, and the policy on bioweapons is absolute. She'll be destroyed. No, Madeline cried out, pulling Melissa to her. That's what created this situation in the first place. Samus called out. I know that, Dane replied. The other option is what keeps Melissa alive, but is just as unpalatable. We keep quiet, Adam translated. The ones who made this project know you have the information and can destroy them, and that keeps those involved safe, but they aren't punished for their actions. They get to keep working, but just get less ambitious about it, keeping it more secret. What? Spike roared out, leaping to his feet. After everything they did, we just let them go? If Melissa's to survive, that's what we have to do. Snarling in defiance of Dane's words, Spike stormed out of the office, smashing part of the metal wall aside as he charged out. Those demolition troopers weren't kidding, Dane murmured, staring at the damage Spike had inflicted, somewhat odd. And that's with his armor limiting his strength to the environment. Anthony quipped. Sorry about him, Samus said quickly, turning to go. Don't be, Dane replied. I feel much the same about this situation. Nodding, Samus raced out to pursue Spike, finding him slumped in the gardens outside the building. Spike! And they just get away with it, Spike mumbled, staring into nothing, his eyes unfocused. Samus stepped forward, putting her hand on Spike's shoulder to offer comfort, but jerked back as she felt the emotional turmoil swirling through him, tearing him apart inside. Spike! They welcomed me, Mom! He moaned out, tears pouring from his eyes. I went into Sector 0, and the Metroids welcomed me as a friend, a brother. They tried to make me comfortable, guide me to places to eat, and when I started to wreck the place, they just kept asking me, why? Why? I knew I had to, and they could see my thoughts, but they couldn't understand. He curled up on himself, shrinking in despair, quite literally. They screamed in fear, and in pain, but they never attacked me. They were made to be weapons, but they were innocents, and I killed them all. I heard their screams as they died, and I heard the silence as they were no more. Spike had shrunk down to the size he'd been when he first set foot on Talon 4, small enough for Samus to cradle in her arms, and that's exactly what she did, scooping him into her embrace, letting his turmoil wash over her, struggling to be the rock in his sea of despair. And the ones who made them, the ones who made those innocent weapons, only to die, they aren't even going to pay for it. Samus' empathic tears beaded Spike's forehead, her emotional control strained beyond its limits as she felt her son's pain. Twilight's tears beaded her returned draconic son's forehead as she held him, feeling his despair as he relived one of the worst moments of his life. Warmth surrounded them both as Samus joined the ponies in trying to offer desperate comfort.